All right, who's ready for Hardened Scales versus Infect? We keep showing up with some excellent Hardened Scales matches here. Like I talked about in a previous episode, a previous video, that we have quite a few Hardened Scales players and quite a few Prowess players at our shop. This is, of course, our epic adventures within the no ban list. Infect versus Hardened Scales. Hardened Scales list is not running any no ban list. I guess the only thing that you could be able to utilize is switch the forest up for the artifact lands and go that route for things. In fact, people were talking about, hey, why don't you run Blazing Shoal Infect for this no ban list adventures? And I said that because it's bad. It's not good. As an Infect player, I would rather have Gataxian Probe to get fuel, get information, know if the coast is clear for me to commit, also be able to run other free spells like Once Upon a Time that can, help me dig for creatures later on, help me find lands if I need them. So we're going to commit to an elf. There's some nobles. And we had a nice setup turn for our Hardened Scales there. There's Zabaz, the Glimmer Wasp, with the modular shenanigans available. All right, so here's the question for everybody. How do you like to, deck out your deck, make it unique for you? Do you go for signature hunting? Do you go for foils? Do you go for, white borders? Do you go for, what are you doing to make your deck unique? But there's 3 damage coming across that Zabaz will run in the way, followed by a Blighted Agent. All right, so we've got an Ink Moth. There is an Arcbound potential here, it looks like. Arcbound's very scary because that's like the big fuel, like pouring gasoline on a fire. You go, okay, I could die right now with this out on the battlefield, or at least I could die next turn, right? So turn 3 coming out here. Here's a scale up. Let's turn this unblockable infected worm into a 6/4, and then there's +4 with the might. So here's 10 damage, turn 3 victory with the Infect. What you're hoping to see, right? The speed at which you could deploy Infect is very nice because it does have that explosiveness. Now, this is really awesome to see from our Hardened Scales players, pulling out this little slip of paper that you can keep in your deck box. You can bring this to events, your locals, larger events, RCQs that have tips and tricks that say, you're in this matchup, take these 4 cards out, take these 2 cards out, sideboard these 2 cards in. And it's a great little setup there and help you, because sideboarding is a difficult skill to sit there and learn about and master and understand. Why should you prioritize taking these cards out? What should you do to bring in this matchup? So now we have a little bit of shift here. We've got our Venerated Rot Priest, which is kind of the newest tool in addition to Infect. Sadly, it's like a baby infector. It does help with when our opponents are swinging spells at us, but all right, there's the scary one. Arcbound Ravager coming out here. So Arcbound Ravager, of course, you can sacrifice an artifact, put a +1 counter on Arcbound Ravager. Then it's got that modular 1. When this comes into play, put a +1 counter. Does Zabaz put an extra counter on Arcbound there? Who can, I thought Zabaz does the extra counters. Let me look this up. I don't remember off the top of my head, and I'm not currently playing Hardened Scales. All right, Zabaz the Glimmer Wasp. Let's see. Zabaz says, if a modular trigger ability would put 1 or more counters on a creature, you control that many +1 counters are put on it instead. So I think it would, right? When it enters, the modular goes off, and Zabaz will see it and put an extra one. Some Hardened Scales players, let me know if that interaction works the way that I think it does. It has been years since I've played Hardened Scales, so I am not as well versed in the interactions in that kind. Now, Urza Saga into Urza Sagas is amazing for the Hardened Scales player because they can sit here and look through these lines. We're seeing this debate with the Ozolith, but we're going to go for another Zabaz because now we get to Spider-Man meme each other. They're legendary creatures, so they will look at each other and be able to go, yeah, that's fine. We're not gonna worry about that. All right, so now this Sabaz gets to be bigger. You've got 1 mana floating, another Urza Saga in hand. That's not even joking saying it. Is it all Urza Saga all the time? And it kind of is. All right, Phyrexian Tower, kind of our newest addition to Hardened Scales players, because we get to do these things like, hey, let's sacrifice this here. I'll get 2 black mana. For 4 mana, I'm going to get a Walking Ballista for 2. And then we can sack Arcbound Ravager to itself and put all of these counters now on this Walking Ballista. Now, this is where Venerated Rot Priest would be better if it counted abilities. Things like Orcish Bowmaster, things like Walking Ballista really hurt an Infect list because, you know, the Venerated Rot Priest only cares about spells that our opponent are casting, or anytime that our spells are cast on it. So spells that we control, spells that our opponents control, that's when we are getting those Infect counters, but it does not count with abilities. So having Walking Ballista out with lots of counters on it essentially locks out us for this. We have to really, you know, rely on our opponent swinging and dealing and shooting it down, and we have to do this little fight. We got a unblockable. We've got our Pendlehaven here to give it extra toughness. But now we're going to see. It's having Walking Ballista is kind of like, oh, okay, the game is essentially over. We just have to try to navigate it and see if there is an opportunity for our opponents to make a mistake. That's basically what happens once that comes out. Now, Zabaz going to have more abilities to add triggers and counters to things is a problem. There's a Springleaf Drum coming out here. Another Urza Saga. That's Urza Saga number 3 for everyone keeping track at home. All right. So, combat's coming in. A 2/2 Walking Ballista. So this is the mistake here. Declaring blockers. Because we are going to do this, and it's costing only 1 counter. Walking Ballista would still be at 1. Our goal is to try to get them to shoot it, so it basically has to be down to 1. But the problem is this little interaction here. Amazing line for a Hardened Scales player to sit here and figure out of, hey, I can tap Zabaz for mana. I'm using this Urza's Saga to get another mana, and then 2 off of this. All right, now, yeah, I'll go through it. And I'm like, wait a minute, where's the 4th mana? Oh, you're tapping this and then sacrificing it and doing it like this. So we, yeah, get an extra counter. And then the modular, because we sacrifice it, it gets on there. So now it's like, oh, no matter what we play here, everything just dies anyway. And that's like, wait a minute, do we activate this? We'd have to commit and spend 2 spells, and then it still is left alive. So without mutagenic to win, so it's like, yeah, it's a lot to commit to keeping it alive, and then there's still no guarantee because our opponent is not going to. Our opponent is very smart on playing against Infect because they've played against it for years with me piloting it, that they know, oh, okay, I can't shoot this during combat and try to kill it. I'll take the 1 damage or the 2 damage that you try to swing at me, and then I'll just shoot it after combat. So all those pump spells that I'm holding on to try to keep it alive will not work there in combat. So yeah, if you're ever, for whatever reason, crazy like me that goes, yeah, let's play Infect. But here we got our first ban card, the Once Upon a Time. Of course, if this is the first spell that you cast, you may cast it for the price of for free. You get a look at those top 5 cards in your library, reveal a creature or a land card, and put that into your hand. See, there's cards like this that exist that go, oh, this helped Infect out. But then other players found it and go, hey, what if we put this in this list and break it? And then they go, we got to ban this card. It's too good. So the few cards that come around that go, oh, this could be cool in Infect. What if we did this in Infect? Like I had a Nadu Infect list for a little bit running around, and then I was like, yeah, but what if you don't do that? What if you sit here and break it with just the Bant Nadu? Why would we be casting pump spells on things when we could just sit here and just win? All right, making a construct. Yeah, creeping corrosion we're joking about. Just blow everything up. All right. So, again, for everybody keeping track, that was the 3rd Urza Saga that has been popped. The 4th one is on the field, ready to get popped. So we're, game 2 is not going well. We've had to fight through all the Urza Sagas, and we've had to fight through, of course, the Walking Ballista. And now no free spells. This Vexing Bobble, you might go, why would they be running? Because the way that it works with casting Cataxian Probe, casting Mutagenic Growth, we're just dead. Or we're just not able to cast those. Right? We cannot cast those spells for the price of for free. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 artifacts on the battlefield. Let's make that, yeah, okay. And there is another Walking Ballista. So not only did we have no more free spells to help protect our creatures, we now have to fight through 5 damage on the Walking Ballistas that they could just kill off 5 creatures, essentially. So yeah, the Hardened Scales matchup is like, we've seen it on the channel a couple times, Infect versus Hardened Scales, where it goes, okay, does the Hardened Scales player get Walking Ballista? Yes. Okay, Infect loses. Does Hardened Scales players not get Walking Ballista? Oh, okay, Infect has a chance to win. That's really the hard line in this matchup here. All right, here's an elf. Another... All right, Urza Saga to start with, and a Zabaz. Yeah, part of the fun of doing the recordings and doing the castings is for us to notice lines and see things that are going on, and all right, let's identify mistakes and how to improve and do better next time. So we've got an elf coming across here. Let's make him a little bigger. There's 2. So there. Hey, remember how we talked about games with Walking Ballista? There's a Walking Ballista in hand right now. So that's the other thing. It's like, all right, if we don't use the Pendelhaven to push for damage, we have it for protection. If we do it to save it, for that, it's like we have these kind of windows here, so it's like these big question marks. But there's an Ink Moth coming down here. 3 lands in hand, Ancient Stirrings, Walking Ballista, for sure we know about. Tough position for a Hardened Scales player, but they can... okay, so this is the scary... Again, we talked about Arcbound Ravager coming down is scary because it just like... makes things weird for rocking the Glistener Elf. And now it's this debate about how much do we commit now. We've got our opponent to 2 counters. Again, you need 10 to win. So it's like this debate of, okay, all right, if we push... They do some blockers. Am I gonna get Gore Clan Rampager? All right, let's do some pumping. Before damage, we'll do some sacrificing. Make this bigger. So now here's the thing. There's this line right here, and this debate that goes on. There's an Ink Moth on our opponent's side. They could try to kill us with Infect with the Ink Moth Nexus. That if we keep our Ink Moth Nexus untapped, we have the ability to block it. Right? That is one option. And go, okay. You can, in the hope that we don't. Now, the other option here is we have a Blighted Agent and enough pump spells to kill our opponent next turn. All right, turn 4. Do we go for that? Yes or no? We opt for the let's hope that our opponent doesn't have an explosive turn here to kill us. All right. Maybe they don't have enough to piece together and get this lined up to deal 10 to us. And so our Hardened Scales player is mapping it out and counting and trying to look for these specific lines. We've got 1 mana floating as an Urza Saga is going to pop. Ozolith makes this really scary here because anytime a counter would be, anytime a creature with counters on it is dead, dies, leaves the battlefield, you get to move those counters onto the Ozolith and then move it onto another creature. So now we, of course, have the ability for the Arcbound Ravager to sacrifice himself to himself, adding additional counters and then, moving it on there. We've also got this Phyrexian Tower that we could blow up our Arcbound Ravager. So the goal is we're going to try to load up this Ink Moth Nexus and try to kill our opponent here. Can we get to 10? That's our goal, right? We got to try to count to 10. So if you look at this right here, there's an Agatha's Soul Cauldron in hand. We're going to activate to start with. Sacrifice this. So here's how this is going to work. Modular will move this here, but we'll also have 3 counters over here. Use the 2 black to make Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So there's the Ballista for 0, which you never want to see. Putting an additional +1 counter. So here's how my math worked out with this. I'm going, okay, that's 7 not dead. Right? And then, guess what? Walking Ballista activated ability lets us to be able to use the Ink Moth Nexus Infect damage to... Yeah, so now I'm going through and talking about, oh, do I commit? So I had ability to block with the Ink Moth. I also had the Vines, which you can use and say, hey, I would like to move these counters onto this Ink Moth Nexus, or I'd like to do things like that where I can go, oh, well, here's this Vines. You can't target it with anything this turn. So all those counters now are not able to go onto that. It basically just fizzles out. But that was that, like, that was my first time seeing that interaction of Agatha's Soul Cauldron, Walking Ballista, Ink Moth Nexus, that, oh yeah, Ink Moth deals damage in the form of Infect damage to players. So when it deals 1 damage off the Walking Ballista, it's essentially dealing 1 poison damage there. So very cool. And that's usually what's great about this is, like, you see a match like that and you go, oh, I learned something new and now I won't make this mistake again. All right. But hope you guys have been enjoying all this great content, a little bit of sprinkling of the no ban list as well as ban list stuff in here. But that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for tuning and watching, everybody. And I'll see you all next game.